Hey, so I heard you want to be able to game, stream, do your designs, your homework, whatever you need to do on a regular PC, but on a single PC setup. I know we've been hearing a lot of talk about dual PC setups and stuff. A lot of the pro gamers out there and pro streamers are using it, but really, most of us don't need it. So I'm going to show you what I put into this piece here, and that's pretty much what I use for my everything: streaming, designs, editing, all together, all at the same time, and no FPS drops or anything like that. So let's head right into it.
So here's a quick look on our previous setup. We're only going to be using the same power supply. Our new parts will include two SSDs, the Corsair Vengence Pro 16GB RAMs, two 27-inch 144Hz Acer monitors. For our graphics cards, I picked up the Radeon 5700 XT along with the Ryzen 7 2700X, both mounted on the Asus ROG B450F. And for the case, I picked up the Corsair Spec 04 with tempered glass. So without any more delay, let's get to the fun part.
So we got everything set out nicely here. We're gonna start by putting in the CPU unit first, and as many of you may know, this is going to be pretty straightforward. Just make sure the word Ryzen lines up with the thick plastic part here. So go ahead and open up the latch, insert your CPU, just make sure it's into place before you close the latch, otherwise you might damage your CPU. You can tell if it's into place or not just by looking to the side and checking that the pins are all the way inside the plastic. So that's pretty much it for the CPU, and next we're going to be installing the CPU fan. To install the CPU fan, just make sure the AMD logo is parallel with the logo of the motherboard. So as you notice, around the CPU socket on the motherboard there are two latches which are going to attach to the latches on the CPU fan, and we're going to be latching on the bottom latch of the CPU fan first. Just make sure you are pulling on the piece of metal coming out of the CPU fan, and this way you have a little more room to insert it into the latch onto the motherboard. Once you've done that for the bottom latch, you can lay the CPU fan on top of the CPU, pull the piece of metal on the top side of the CPU fan, push it down, and latch the top on properly. So after that's done, make sure to pull the lever or push the lever on the top side of the CPU fan to the other side. That way everything is settled into place properly and there's no wiggling or unsturdiness going on around the CPU. With that said, remember, make sure to install the bottom side of the latch first and then the top side. Next, we're just going to connect the wires coming out of the CPU fan and just get that out of the way with. There are three wires that are coming out of the CPU. One is to power up the CPU, one is to connect it to the motherboard, and the third one is to power up the LEDs on the CPU fan. Next, we're going to be installing 16 gigabytes of RAMs, which I'm going to be putting into the first slot and the third slot. I am using the Corsair Vengence Pro, the RGB version, and on my motherboard there's only one latch in each slot that opens up. So once I've lined up my RAM correctly, I make sure that it's inserted properly and all the way into the slot, and the latch is back to the original position it was in. As you can see in the video, my latches were not back in the original position, but I did make sure to put them back in the position they're supposed to be before putting my motherboard in my case. So here is the GPU we're going to be installing on this system, and you want to make sure to remove the plastic protector at the bottom before you install it, and also make sure you elevate your motherboard before you install your GPU, because at the end of the GPU where it connects to the case there's a metal casing which kind of pops out of the motherboard, and if you're on a flat surface you will not be able to do it. So make sure you elevate your motherboard just to give you an easier time installing the GPU. Once you install it and you put it into place, you have to make sure that it's connected and latched in all the way through. It's kind of similar to the RAM, so just make sure it's clipped in properly, and if you feel like it's not sturdy or it's wiggling a lot, you might need to remove it and just put it back in. Make sure that it's sturdy, or at least slightly sturdy, because you still do need to connect it to the case, and that will make it even sturdier and just right. With that said, let's go right ahead and open up the case, put in the motherboard and all the other components right in. Mainly from here on, you just want to make sure that you have connected your wires properly to the motherboard from these components, and then that would be pretty much it. The case does not have that many connections. If it does, they are very straightforward. They are either your SSD or hard drive connection, or they are your front panel connection, which usually is clearly marked out in the manual of your motherboard. Also, there will be the fan connections, which are pretty straightforward. Usually on the motherboard itself it says fan port or fan 1, fan 2, etc. So you can just follow that. Just make sure you know that there is a box inside the hard drive slots, which includes all your screws and maybe some ziplocs and some other stuff that you may need to install your motherboard and wirings onto the case. I spent some time looking for that. For me specifically, I put in a set of 5 fans, which were connected to one hub, and then that hub was connected to the motherboard. So I had to kind of find a way around that. Took me a little while and didn't want to bore you with that. So I went ahead and put in the motherboard with all the connections into the PC. Here's how it looked.